Hey, everybody, welcome to the Good Grief podcast, where we are navigating grief with grace, reflection, impact, empowerment, and faith. We are your host, Camille Aiko
and Erico.
And this is a safe space for real conversation, healing, and hope. So, whether you are grieving the loss of a loved one, a life transition, or simply trying to find your way through life, you don't have to do it alone. Let's walk this journey together. So, drop a heart in the comments if you have ever felt like grieving is overwhelming. Drop a heart and go ahead and share this out. We're going to be doing this every week. So go ahead and share this. But drop a heart in the comments if you've ever felt like grieving has just been overwhelming in your life. And hopefully our internet will work properly for us. For us, or should I say for me, but I guess for us, I feel like I have been grieving, honestly, for about the past 4 years or so of life. I feel like we've had a lot of loss. But then I've also had a lot of life transitions where I've had to navigate things where I feel like, okay, it may not necessarily be a loss, but it's definitely something different, being in a different space, being in something that I hadn't experienced before. And so even though, for example, marriage, even though I was gaining a husband, but moving across the country made me have a different relationship with my family. And then losing so many people. So I feel like for me personally, I've been in this state of grief and transitioning for quite some time.
Yeah, I definitely would agree that it's been like 4 to 6 years for me between my children going off to college, dealing with loss, dealing with major changes, like just we're speaking in general, but literally our mom getting sick. That changed like my process. Grief has been going on and changes have been going on for a long time. But definitely when those babies left for college, it hit me. The change was real in my house.
Yeah. So I think a lot of times with grief, there's a lot of different misconceptions that happen. And people often think that grief is only losing a loved one, or about just loss, period. And there's so much more to grief. And I think that's one of the things that we really want to bring out in this podcast. I mean, we're going to talk about grief in the sense of losing someone in death. But we definitely want to hone in on how you experience grief in those life transitions, because it's real. And I think sometimes people don't feel seen in those moments. People don't realize the impact that they're experiencing.
Definitely not. Like, you're not the first person to go through it. You won't be the last. That's kind of how, some people, I'm sure they have felt. I'm sure you felt that way. Like you weren't the first person to get married and move. I wasn't the first person to have kids to go off to college. And people are like, get over it, move on. But for me personally, that was personal for me. That was a loss for me. So yeah, it wasn't just in a death, although it felt like it was a death.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing, is it can feel like it's a death, and people need to learn how, as we were already saying, is give grace for that, but to acknowledge it. Like we have to acknowledge those emotions that we're experiencing and be able to identify why we're feeling the way that we're feeling, and really be able to analyze that for ourselves so that we can get the healing and move forward that we need. So, I mean, grief can come from losing relationships. It can come from losing dream jobs, or just a job, period, right? You can experience that grief. It can come from having a health situation where you might be grieving the life you once had, or you can be grieving just feeling good or no longer feeling good in your body because of a health situation, or even identity, right? So all of these things we can be grieving about, but do we know how to properly grieve so that we can continue to move forward. I think another thing is, as we talked about emotions, but it's not just emotions, right? It's not just crying, it's not just sadness, but it's exhaustion. Grief can look like numbness, anger, guilt.
You starve yourself or you eat. I mean, like, it's big. Grief can be anything. Like, when we lost our mom, I lost 15 pounds and didn't even notice it. When my kids, like you say, when you lost your identity, for my son, he just got done playing football. Ari just got done playing football. He played football from the time he was in second grade up through college. And he kind of looked as his last game like, who am I? I'm not Ari the football player. I'm like, and he kind of, for the whole 3-hour car ride, was just trying to figure out, and he's still trying to figure out, like, who am I? And that's kind of like the same thing for moms that have kids that are in sports and they're no longer playing that sport. You're like, I'm no longer the soccer mom. I'm no longer the football mom. Who am I now? You gotta just figure out. And that also comes in, like, it may look like depression. It may just look like laying around like it's nothing to do on a Saturday anymore. You just got to get up, though, and kind of do something different. And that kind of takes me into the roller coaster of emotions. So, Ari, so as an example, I just said Ari. That's my second child. I said for the 3-hour car ride, he was angry. Like, I didn't get to play as much as I wanted to. And then it was just like, there was sadness. And then we got to the Nike outlet and he changed because he was like, okay, I'm fine. But then got back in the car and was like, I'll never need these socks. The socks took him back to a place. So there are several different emotions that you're going to go through dealing with grief, no matter what it is. Like we've said, grief and the loss of a person, the loss of a relationship, the change. I just feel like some days, personally for me, losing my mom, some days I'm fine and I can go on and be okay. I'm going to say okay. I'm not going to say, because it'll be 6 months here. I don't think that I've gotten to the point where I know personally I am not the person I was before she left. But there are days. How do you mean that? I'm not as happy as I was, and that's not that anything wonderful isn't going on or anything like that. But like, my smile isn't as bright. I definitely have bags. I don't usually use makeup, but here I am putting stuff under my eyes just to be like, oh, I look alive. But then there's like this moment where I was telling my sister, it was a song and it came on, it had, it was like, I'll miss you forever. She's poking me. That's evil. I guess I'm knocking the table, guys. She reminded me of my mother when she was poking me. So no, but honestly, just thinking of things like that. So just know that one day you'll be okay. There'll be something like a song that just triggers you. Yeah. Something small, something real minor. Like, it was some cookies I saw, and it took me over. And that's the same thing, like you were saying, with health. I didn't realize I'm gluten-free, you all. It's not the place to be. Thumbs down. But I was just looking at we went out to dinner, and they were eating all this bread at Texas Roadhouse with the butter. And do you know what? I had peanuts, and I was roller coastering because I was like, what if I eat this bread? And I was excited because I was going to eat this bread, and then I thought, probably not a good idea. You see what I'm saying? Like, just the loss of being able to eat wheat almost took me over the edge today at dinner. So just little minor things, and know that it's okay to have those moments. So have you, like, what type of emotions have you dealt with in any of the loss? As you were saying, you got married and moved away. We lost our mom. You've dealt with loss, with our grandparents, etc.
I think for me, what has been my motto that I've taken on in dealing with grief is taking life moment by moment. because from one moment you can be in a good headspace. Okay, I'm focused. I'm doing what I need to be doing, and then the next moment you're like, what the heck? I feel lost. I feel like I've been ripped from my mother's umbilical cord, and like, how am I supposed to survive in this life?
It's okay to be dramatic.
But yeah, for me, you know, that's literally how I felt. Like I'm in this ocean of emotion and just out here trying to figure it out. And so it might even feel like it's dramatics, but even in that, it's kind of like it's okay. Um, and literally, it's like I've been with my mom all my life. She's been there all my life. So it's like, how do you now make this transition to live with when you no longer have that person anymore, and what does that look like now? So that's how it's been, kind of in the loss of my mother. You know, in the talking about health, this isn't mine personally, so I'll share one just slightly, but my husband had a double stroke 2 years ago, and I have seen him grieve his old life, who he used to be, and having to fight, you know, to get the motivation to just get up and live. And there's that grieving process that he's continuously, even now, still going through, because he's not who he was. He's not back to where he was, and there's no guarantee that he ever will be. You know, from a medical perspective, they say, okay, you know, after a year, you kind of plateau, and whatever healing you've experienced between now and then, that's how you're going to be. So I think even in that, though, he has taken the small steps to say, okay, I'm still going to work to become better. And I think one of the things through grief is you can't take your eye off of the prize, that one day you won't experience the grief in such huge waves of emotions, or to the point where it consumes your life, right? After my mother passed, it was like I didn't feel like doing anything. I didn't want to talk to anybody. It was like everybody, unless you came to my door and was in my face, there is a high probability I did not talk to you. And after, for probably about a couple months, it was just kind of like I was in my own zone. I was there for my family, and anybody else, it was kind of like, you'll figure it out. If you need to talk to somebody, you'll go and talk to them. But at the same time, I knew I wouldn't always be in that space. So I think, you know, this is a good segue into what does grief stand for. So we call this Good Grief, right? And I think this is a good segment because stands for grace. And so when we're thinking about the framework for good grief, G is give yourself grace. You don't have to be strong all the time. Like, I'm used to being the strong person. When somebody needs something, when somebody needs advice, people aren't used to seeing me be the one who's like, I don't want to talk, or to myself, or I don't really have anything to give you. I'm empty right now. And people weren't used to seeing me that way. And so it was like, is she okay? Yeah, I'm okay. But I need this space.
Have you talked
to
myself?
Your sister? Right. And so, right. But, you know, give yourself grace. It's okay to not be the strong person. It's okay to cry. It's okay. And you have to know that it's okay. R is, do you want to add anything to give yourself grace?
No, I just like she said, really give yourself grace. I feel like I went back to work too fast. And I was like, oh my goodness, I got to go back to work. But in the meantime, when I was thinking about going back to work, I didn't think about myself. I didn't think about me at all. I was like, I got to go back. Because it wasn't like I wasn't getting paid. I had days. And if I could do it all over again, I would give myself grace. Because I find myself at work like, I don't want to be here. I'd rather be hanging out going, hang out with my dad. My sister's here in town. Go hang out with my sister. So grace is so important, that you listen to yourself, and anybody else at this point just kind of, it's just like, oh, you got on headphones, you got those beats, and you can't hear them. Really, just listen to yourself and know what's going to be best for you.
Yeah, absolutely. R of grief. Reflect on your loss. It's okay to sit with your emotions. I think one of the things that a lot of people try and do when they are experiencing grief is, and in particularly when they are, well, it could be in so many different things, but specifically like death. I think people try and busy themselves to overcome their grief, but you're really just burying the grief. And those emotions and the things that you're feeling are going to come up at some point. And so I think it's important for you, and this is part of the reason why I was like, I just have to cut out all of the extra noise of hearing the common phrases and the common things, because I knew that. But I needed to sit with, how do I feel about the things that I know? And how do I get to a point to align how I'm feeling with what I believe? And to make sure that I just sit there and just take a moment to think about my thoughts, to feel my thoughts, to express those even outwardly, because sometimes that reflection for me led to like loud screaming and just being, if anybody was in the car with me would have thought I was this crazy person, but it was the emotion that I needed to get out. And in grief, sometimes we allow ourselves to get busy versus reflecting and feeling and allowing all of that you're feeling to come up out of you, and it is okay. And we can't get healing is not busyness. So if you don't take anything else away from what I said in that little paragraph there, I want you to know healing is not busyness. Busyness is not healing. You have to take the time to reflect.
Neither is shopping. I only say that when I dropped my son off to college, because he was my firstborn. He was going to Morehouse, it had been COVID, so we had been, in tight quarters. I didn't reflect on what it was like to have him gone. So on the way home, what did I do? Stopped at Nike and spent $500 that I probably shouldn't have. So I didn't take some time to reflect. Shopping is not the key. Just wanted you to know, in your reflection, don't go shopping to Nike, okay? It's not a good idea, guys.
Right, so we want to find healthy ways. But, and even, that's just a good point, that, even in your grief and your feelings, your emotions, is that to sit with them and find healthy ways to cope versus unhealthy ways to cope, right? So part of that is identifying your support system, so that when you are going through, you have somebody that you can call on, you have somebody that will listen to you, and you have to really strategically put those people in place and understand what it is that you need, because it may be that you just need someone to listen to you, and that's it. Some people want to always give you advice, and it's like, I don't need advice right now. So you need to know how to strategically set up the support system that you need, or having those spaces, even like this group, where you can just come in and drop, like, I miss my mom, or I miss my whoever, or this is what's going on with me, this is how I'm feeling. You have to create that support system and be very intentional about it, because otherwise you'll find yourself suffering in silence. You'll find yourself suffering alone. You'll find yourself suffering and feeling like that the weight of the world is on your shoulders and you're the only one who can lift it. And that's just simply not the case. But you do have to be intentional about your about creating that support in your community. you have anything that you want to add to?
No, I agree with that wholeheartedly. And don't call the friend. This is my advice. You didn't ask for it, but I'm gonna tell it to you. Don't call the friend that's gonna be like, "Girl, I know." No, you don't know. Like, just you want to find that person, like she's saying, find somebody who, like she said, be strategic in who you call. Be strategic who you put in this circle, because I've learned that my relationship with a lot of people changed. So I'll say my circle got smaller, but it also got stronger in the sense of if I needed to just talk about, my mom, or I needed to just vent, and not somebody then been like, oh, I remember when I lost my dog. Well, girl, I'm not talking about your dog right now. And that happened 8 years ago. Can I have my moment? Like, you need to make sure people are going to allow you to have those moments. Call on the right people for sure. And even if your circle has to change for however long, or your relationships have to change to allow you to become a stronger person, to help you to continue to build, because it's a process. And that's just in life anyway, without grief, identifying your support system.
Yeah. I think one of the things that you said before we move on to the next point is when people say they know how you feel. And I think that it's important, especially when the grief is fresh, that we can say we can identify with the loss, but we don't always know specifically how someone feels, because everybody, even in losing the same person, for me and my sister, right, how we feel can be two different ways. So it could be the same person. Yeah, we know how we feel for losing a mother, but again, those feelings towards how I might feel because I lost my mother is different. And so I think that we often, and it's nothing against anybody. I think this is just learning as we've gone through this process. Like, no, because I think even as siblings, there's 5 of us collectively, and I think we've all have felt something different. Even in losing a parent in general, if I'm talking to someone who has lost their parent, or lost their mother, they may not feel the way that I feel, of being ripped from their umbilical cord and swimming in the ocean, drowning in emotion. They may not feel that way. They might be like, my mama was horrible. I'm glad she gone. Like, and unfortunately, hopefully you're not that mother, but people feel that way. I know there is a woman that I follow on social media, and her father passed, and she's like, I didn't go to the funeral. He treated me badly as I was growing up and even into my adult years, and I don't really feel any type of way about it. End of story. And so that would never be my story. So even though I haven't lost my father yet, I already know that I'm not going to at least think that way, right? that won't be the story that I tell to people. So I think it's just important that we kind of stay away from, oh, I know, because you don't know it, because everybody's feeling, everybody's experience is different. And then you kind of have to use discernment on, and I guess we're harping on something that we should talk about later, but nonetheless,
here we are.
Now. Yeah, it's just, well, let's just save that for later.
Come back to the next podcast.
All right, but the other thing here is that we want to be able to embrace new routines. Because if you don't know how to embrace a new routine in loss, then you're going to find yourself in sadness. Because it's like this: if you don't replace what is now no longer, you'll sit there and instead of in a positive way sit in your emotions, You'll negatively be sitting there in your emotions because you're not doing it with intention. You're just going through what you would normally go through. And then when you get to that point, it's like, but they're not here, And so now it's like, oh, now you're sad. Now you're depressed. So you have to find a way to embrace new routines when you have lost someone, lost something, right? As we talked about, grief isn't just about death. So it's about finding your new normal without guilt. It's okay. And I think one of the things that my sister said is like, she doesn't smile as much. Now, she didn't explain why she doesn't smile as much, but let's say for me personally, it kind of felt for a little bit like, why am I even smiling? What is there to be happy about? And having to then be like, no, but it's okay to smile. Yes, my mother is gone, but she would have wanted me to support. She would want me to find happiness in somebody else's being happy. She would want me to be happy with my family. And so it's like, okay, now we got to find that new norm. Even though I don't feel like it, I have to embrace this new routine of even just being around people and being happy when inwardly I knew that there was something that was missing. And I think even learning to compartmentalize that was very key for me. It's kind of like losing my mom, even though it might have felt like it was my world had crushed. It was only a piece, a part of my life. And I still have to show up for my husband. I still have to show up for my father. I still have to show up for my siblings. I still have to show up for friends. I still have to show up in life because even though my mother's time here on earth had ended, I'm still here. I've still got to keep going. Anything you want to say? Because she told me she was going to have all the ad-libs.
I did, but I'm over here thinking them and I haven't said them because I'm like, oh, she's in such a great place. And I want to say that it's okay not to be there. It's okay not to be, because I was like, oh man, maybe I should feel. But in the loss of our mom, I still show, like, I have several children. We won't say how many currently. Guess if you want to drop it in the
currently. Do you have more on the way?
Oh God, no. Never mind. There's 7 kids. There's no more coming from this body. Okay, 0. But I'm not where she is. Like I show up for my kids. I show up for my family. But that's really like that's where I am. I'm not at the same place she is, and that's okay. If you're dealing with a loss with a parent, if your sibling is somewhere way different than you are, just respect that and respect where you are is important. And I chuckled when she said, find your new normal. We went out to dinner, and for a long time I used to be like, oh man, I don't really want to go out because who's going to eat the leftovers? My older son is my leftover king. So I would feel guilty about going out. And then I came to the conclusion, let me embrace this new normal because my bill got a little bit cheaper. Like that was kind of how I changed it. Still felt guilty. He was gone at college and couldn't enjoy these meals. But definitely it's okay to be a little bit slower embracing the new routines, but don't not embrace them. It should be what I say. Don't not embrace them, but also it's not a race. Realize that you are not racing anybody. I'm not racing my sister to be where she is. I'm not racing either one of my brothers, any of the 3 of them. I'm okay with where I am in life. I would come and help our mother get dressed on Sundays. So this morning, she was like, don't be like, oh, I should be there. And that was exactly where I was. I was like, I would be coming home from getting mom ready now. So what am I going to do? I actually opened up the Bible and turned on some praise and worship.
And that's a new routine.
That's definitely
so
new.
It's not, I guess, and what I was saying is not to, you're going to feel how you feel. You're going to have those moments. But in that, what is the new routine? Because if you don't find the new routine and, okay, well, instead of going this space where I would go and help mom, what can I do here now? Okay, well, I can read my word and play praise and worship music. That's embracing the new routine. Not that you'll never think about where you were, but that's exactly what we're saying is
don't pick up my new routine though. It's going to Starbucks every Sunday morning and spending $50. Don't do it. That's my new routine every Sunday.
Right, so we clearly know that's how my sister has an emotional spending problem, so we'll work on that. But
she's got a book out there.
F for grief, yes, and it does help you to renew your mind. In fact, that's what the first half of the book is. It's about renewing your mind.
Twice.
But F, finding meaning, honoring your loved one with moving forward. Honestly, there have been moments where I could hear my mind, my mama being like, come on now, you got to do better than that. And because that's just how she was sometimes. She was just very frank and
very blunt. Very like, I don't care about your feelings, get your life.
Especially in her later days, our mother dealt with vascular dementia. And so, if you've ever dealt with someone, one, aging, and we all have, and then two, having dementia on top of that, we know that could be a very forthcoming combination where they're not holding much back. But even in that, prior to that, my mother was always kind of like I'm going to set my goal and I'm going to go after it and I'm going to go get it. And so, with knowing that, part of what I've even been doing in my life and in my business and being like, okay, Camille, I got to get it together, because my mother would be asking me, what am I doing? Am I moving forward in business, or how am I doing? And she would want to know. And those questions and hearing her voice over and over and over again in my head is what made me really snap out of the depression that I was in, because it was like, okay, if mom were here, what would she be thinking about what I'm doing right now? And that has helped me to find meaning. And even part of the reason why we have started this podcast here is because it was like, okay, let me help. And as I'm finding meaning and as I'm pushing forward to honor my mother in my own personal life, how can I help others do that? Hence, now this is birth. And so finding meaning can also look like starting a business. It could look like starting a foundation. It could look like starting a
feeding my
scholarship.
children.
It could look like feeding her children. Hopefully she was already doing that before our mother passed.
So I say that because I laugh. Our mom, we didn't do a lot of like restaurants. She did a lot of homemade cooking, we had a lot of homemade meals. So I have made it a very conscious effort, even though we are an extremely busy family. We are rarely home. There might be like a 2-hour window. No, I don't even give it that much. We're like an hour window where I try to prepare something really fast. So much so my kids told me we were eating way too early. It was 5:00. They were like, who's about to eat this meal? And I'm like, you better be grateful there's some food on this table. But I know that seems silly, but it wasn't, because I'm like, you know what? I remember sitting down eating just about every meal together as a family, and I was realizing like we're not doing that. We're not taking the time. And our mom had traditions, and so that's what I'm choosing to do. I'm choosing to take the traditions that she taught us, that we lived with, even if it is cooking a meal, like a home cooked meal.
Yeah.
Whether it's spaghetti, or I don't like to eat spaghetti. So if you're on here and you want to ever cook me a meal, don't do spaghetti. Okay, it was important, so any of my friends come back and watch this. No spaghetti, all right? But no, seriously, I think that's just what I'm doing. I'm not gonna go out and start a business. Even in doing this, this is new for me. My sister is like, she is out there. She is killing it in the world of social media, businesses. She's amazing. Like, that's what she does. For me, I'm just like, girl, just sell it to me. I will buy it. Here again, another buying issue. Man, I do have a spending issue. Don't tell my husband. I hope he doesn't get on here. But just simple thing, guys. You don't even have to go out and start a business. Cook a meal. Bake your kid cakes. If your kids, if you're whomever used to love, or you want to honor, used to bake cookies with your kids, bake cookies with your kids. It could be something small and simple like that. So just know that listening to their voice, as long as it's not a dog, because I'm not sure that they really speak to us, go buy a new one. That's what I got for you. Honor their memory.
Yep.
SPCA.
Yep. And then, if it is something, a different type of grief that you're experiencing, it's about finding new meaning even within that, right? So if it's something health-wise, okay, so now something traumatic has happened to your health. How can you find new meaning within that and make it so that, okay, this has happened. This is what I'm dealing with now. This is my reality. So now in my reality, how can I find meaning within this without staying in the reflection, staying stuck in the emotion? What is it that I can do? And so again, it doesn't have to be, like we said, starting a business or anything. It can be where, okay, now you want to do a Facebook Live and teach people about the condition that you have, or maybe you want to teach a class, or it could be now that you want to educate your family, or it could just be so many different things. Maybe it's just a mindset shift that you now need to have to say, in order to live my best healthy life, I need to do this. Sometimes it's just about changing the way that you're thinking about it so that you can have a greater meaning and you can move forward. Because if you're not moving forward in life, then you're complacent. If you're complacent, you're not growing. And if you're stagnant and not growing, then we all know how the saying goes, you're dying, right?
You're stale.
And we don't
stink. Okay, maybe you don't stink. I just threw that.
But it's important. So just to go back over that, our grief framework is 1, give yourself grace. R is reflect on loss. And again, this isn't just death. It could be a transition in life, or maybe you're just trying to move and find your way forward. Identify your support system. E, embrace new routines. F, find meaning. So which one of these 5 areas do you struggle with the most? Let us know in the comments. If you care to share, let us know in the comments. Which one of those areas do you struggle with the most? So I guess that's just kind of our intro session for today. As you can see, we have a lot to say, and we're at 2 different places in our grieving and how we even function within that, and that's okay. And I think that's going to give everybody a fresh perspective. Or you might feel like, oh, okay, I'm at where Camille is, or I'm at where Erica is. And that's Erica with the O. She wanted us to make
it's Erica with an A and an O, not Erica.
Right. Not Erica. Okay, that was a little confusing the way you said that, but it's all good. So, this is going to be, though, a safe space to talk about grief honestly. We want to be able to provide tools and strategies for coping with everyday life. This is going to be faith-based encouragement for those who are seeking healing, a community where people don't feel alone in grief. So hopefully, you guys will begin to tune in. Now, what this podcast is not, it's not about moving on or just getting over it. We know that when we lose someone,
or change
happens. Right. So as we've already explained our grief definition, right, we know that it's not just moving on or just getting over it, but it's learning how to take that loss that we've experienced and grow with it, right? And be able to acknowledge what has happened so that we can reach a greater level in our lives. And sometimes, that growing with it is just simply being able to acknowledge it and be able to, what am I trying to say here?
Oh no, you were saying it.
I was but you know, it's learning not to, when you're growing through it, it may not be anything extravagant, but it could be like, for me, one of the things that I do is I quote my mother. Like, that's something that me and my mom would always do. We would quote people like, well, my grandma used to say, or so and so used to say. And so I do that now. Like, well, my mama would say, just to acknowledge and not try to bury the feeling, but or act like she's not here, but to help me move through life, keeping her memory alive.
It's not a one size all fits all type of podcast. Because like she said, there's 5 of us, children who lost their mother, and her grief is her personal grief. Mine is my personal. You know, we experience different emotions, different. Just it's just different, like we said before. And even at that, like, this is not just about a podcast about loss, specifically losing a loved one, whether it be a person or an animal or whatever. This is about, you know, becoming an empty nester, your kids transitioning to college, you know, health situation. We get it. Like, we want it because we've experienced like this.
Getting married.
Yeah.
You can experience grief in that.
It'll be crazy, but we want to be here. Like, this podcast is one that is not, we listen and we don't judge. Like, that's what that is. We're that's what it's going to be. We're going to be here for each other in the journey. And just know that we won't be a cookie cutter type of podcast dealing with good grief, as we said. So
it's not a replacement for therapy. So but a supportive space. So we are not therapists.
No, I don't want to be unless you're pissed.
We're just yeah, we can help coach you through some things, but we're not therapists, okay? So I don't want you all to take anything and say, okay, well, they'll be our replacement. I mean, unless it's really helping you. But we did not go to school for this. We're just taking our personal experiences and putting them in this group specifically to help those who are dealing with any type of grief. You know, we didn't talk about dad. We didn't talk about dad and grief.
Because
like when he had COVID.
Oh, okay. I thought you were talking about grief with mom, because I was going to be like, hey guys, that's a whole nother podcast. We can be here for hours.
I mean, all of it is a whole nother podcast. But anyway, I digress. So anyway, we're going to be going live every Sunday. And then at some point, we're going to start uploading our episodes onto Spotify and starting a podcast. So if you guys watch this and you watch it to the end to even hear me ask this question, if you all think this would be beneficial, just let us know in the comments. Let us know what type of content you want from us. What are the things that you're dealing with? And make sure once I put the link out there that you all subscribe to the podcast so that you don't miss anything. So yeah, this was our first one. It was a good conversation. So next Sunday we will talk about the first step in good grief. And we kind of talked a lot about it tonight, but we'll go more and focus more in on that of giving yourself grace in the process of grieving and what that looks like. So if today's conversation resonated with you, share this with somebody. Maybe they can also find some help or find some comfort, find some support within this group. So I just want you guys to know you are not alone. Your grief is valid and healing is possible.
It is definitely possible. It was fun being here with you all. Thank you all for getting on. Invite a friend to the Good Grief group for whatever process or whatever they're grieving. Because like I said, we got experience. All the experiences. So we thank you all for tuning in to the first session of our live Good Grief.
Thank you, Reggie. Reggie says, great job, ladies.
Oh, thanks for stopping by, Reggie.
So, dear Lord, we just thank you for this time that you have allowed us to come together to talk about grief and how we are healing through this. Lord, we ask you just to be with everybody who watches this live or listens to this on our podcast. Lord, just help us to heal our grieving hearts, Lord, whether it be because we lost someone, or whether we're going through a life transition, or whether we're just trying to find out where we are in this thing called life. Lord, be with us, be our guide, help us to focus on you. Lord, bring anybody who is feeling depressed out of that depressive state. Know that there is hope, know that there is healing. And Lord, we just bless your name. We thank you. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. So, talk to you guys next Sunday.
Have a wonderful week, guys.
All right. Bye.